So let me say a few things about this class. I'm calling it Creativity, Balance, Sacramentality, and the Story of the Gospel. A lot of stuff in there.
Wow.
And I want to thank my friend Elena Olga. She's the illustrator of one of my books. Father Andrew Stephen Damick, Deacon Nicholas Kotar, and a couple other contributors, whether they knew they were contributors or not. I'm basing a lot of this lesson on some of the works they've been doing. And I actually was having trouble getting this lesson together because there's so many parts to it that I thought what I was trying to do is break it up and make it a series of lessons, but my thought wasn't crystallizing. Then I talked to some people that are like, no, you really can't unpack this. So you just have to do it, see where you go, and then just pick up where you left off for successive lessons. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So we're not going to accomplish them all today, but there's really 3 objectives to this lesson, whether it's 2 Sundays or 3 Sundays. One is to look at how we can live our faith in proper balance, neither withdrawing from the world or capitulating to it, to our detriment, because there's dangers. We were talking about extremes before we went live. There's dangers to either one of those extremes. We're going to get into the role of art, story, music, literature, whatever form of art, as a means to achieve this balance and as a means to deepen our understanding and appreciation for sacramentality, the sacramental nature of the church, the sacramental nature of reality. And then hopefully all this will add up to further deepening our understanding about each of us can be lights of Christ. So I'm going to read a quote to you, and this quote is going to serve as a basis for unpacking all this stuff today and in successive weeks. The quote goes like this: "For a Christian is not called to flee the world or mankind, to reject it or curse it. He is called to bring the light of Christ's teaching into earthly life and to creatively reveal the gifts of the Holy Spirit in the fabric of this life. And this means that we must create a Christian culture." That's by a Russian Orthodox philosopher and I believe a political commentator, Ivan Ilyin. He wrote a book in 1937 called, yeah, you're familiar with him?
Yeah.
Foundations of Christian Culture. He wrote it in 1937. My friend Deacon Nicholas, good morning, Nicole. My friend Deacon Nicholas passed out that book at a conference this summer as a free, it's only like 50 pages. Very impacting book. I was shocked when I got to the end, or when I looked closer and I realized it was written in 1937, because I practically highlighted the whole thing. Everything he wrote back then applies to modernity as we sit in 2019. And so this particular quote, good morning, John, welcome. This particular quote, I thought, was very accurate in terms of our belief as Orthodox Christians, how we should integrate with culture as based on the scriptures, the Holy Fathers, the holy tradition of the Church. So I want to look at the first part of that quote that says, "For a Christian is not called to flee the world or mankind, to reject it or to curse it." And good morning, Kaylatina, did I say your name right? Good morning. So a Christian is not called to flee the world or mankind, to reject it or to curse it. So what's a Christian called to do then? Throw it out there.
Well, if it's the opposite of this, it's to engage, to interact, to set an example, to teach.
And how do we do that? I included some scriptures. I don't know if anybody read them. It's okay if you didn't.
I did.
I included some scriptures about the world, what the Bible says, what Paul says, what Jesus said, some others. So for those of you that read, or just remember those, what would you say the essence of what the New Testament scriptures are teaching us about the world?
Kind of like be in the world, but not of the world.
Right? That's what the evangelist John said,
Right.
and said in his particular, his first epistle, 1 John.
And talking to people about how you feel like St. Paul, telling people how he used to be and how he was
Witnessing.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it's an interesting to see, Paul in particular, because we were shown the extent of how he was to what he became. We have that compare and contrast in the New Testament. We don't get that with all the saints.
And as being an example, by having the love in your heart and treating others the way God would want you to treat them, you're an example of Christ.
Light of Christ, an example. What else? Anything else? We talked the week before last. We talked about the mustard seed. Remember? Mm-hmm. And one of the things we learned from his use of the mustard seed, to become that example, doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. You have to be bruised or crushed to be willing to suffer like Christ suffered, and embrace that suffering sacramentally, so that you can allow it in your pain to transform you, to teach you. So yes, we need to become examples, living lights of Christ. And it's hard because, actually those scriptures that I chose, at first, I'll read one of them. And do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God, right? So conform and transform are the two words that I highlighted there, because it speaks to the essence of what, when the Bible uses the word world, it often, some of the other scriptures I chose, it often paints the world in somewhat of a negative light, right? Would you agree with that,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So then, but yet, we're being told not to come out of it, not to be conformed to it, but yet it's portrayed as something potentially negative. So how do we reconcile that?
Well, I mean,
Make sure everybody speaks a little bit so people can hear.
Christ was in the world, just like we are.
Right.
So if we're to be, as Tina said, Christ-like, he was in the world and expects us to be in the world, and to serve and witness and the things that we have stated. I think that's how you have to unpack that. I mean, again, as John said, you got to be in the world but not of the world, and if you have light, you can shine it and witness. The difference is, I think, that the purpose of this education class and others that we go through, the process is to try, I don't know if we necessarily succeed all the time, to be a better witness. And through that, let your light shine, and that's the witnessing and the conformity that is expected, because where God gives us much, I think he expects much from us. And I think certainly everybody in this room can say that we've been given much.
Yeah, there's several comments online I want to acknowledge. John points out how orthodoxy is timeless. That's true. That there's a temptation in modern culture and modernity to look at, especially our faith, which we brand ourselves the ancient faith all the time, to look at our faith as maybe being something of the past or something of antiquity. We have to remember, not so much folks in this room that are, or those that are online, because you wouldn't be participating in something like this if you didn't know and accept that truth. But that doesn't mean that there, within our own church, some people sometimes will question things that we do as antiquated, perhaps. Nicole brings up endurance. That's an important word too. Going back to the mustard seed, we, in order to be engaged in the world in the right way, it does require a lot of endurance, because the more that we grow in our faith, the more that we see what's around us in a clearer way, and we react differently. You and I were just talking last night sometimes how we, our reaction to maybe certain art forms that we didn't think about in our 20s, but now we'll look at now, we're like, that's not really good. Mm-hmm. Why are they doing that? Or things like that. So I would throw out this to you. So what are your thoughts on, for those of us, especially here in the West, on Christian counterculture, Christian bookstores, Christian rock, Christian, what else did I write down? Christian art, things that are labeled Christian this or Christian that. Go ahead, John.
Well, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to bring up something that's related to this is Christian culture in America. There's a very moving video that just came out a couple of days ago based on a trial where this woman, a police officer, accidentally killed a gentleman in her apartment, or in his apartment, and make a long story short, the brother of the slain individual in the courtroom asked, he professed his faith in Christ and asked if he can hug the killer of his brother. And it's a very Christian moment. It's extraordinarily moving. It's difficult to watch.
It is difficult.
Because it's so touching. Yeah. But in America, there's now a debate, and a very legitimate one, as to whether or not it's okay for the judge to come down and give a Bible to the defendant and preach Christ. And so you have a beautiful example of mercy in a Christian culture in America, but it conflicts with our secular legal system, and it's going to engender a very important debate about how we treat people who are seeking forgiveness, seeking mercy, and can you do it in a Christian way in a secular West?
Who saw that
But
video?
I
saw it.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw it too.
I also read a headline there that the mother said not to take that out of context, what he did. I don't know what that meant.
Oh,
I just saw that headline.
To see the actual.
So, but
But there's your Christian culture.
yeah, for those online that may have not seen this, I forget what the young lady's name, Amber something or other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Geiger.
it's fresh in the news.
Right, but I'm
Yeah.
only saying that so people can look it up. They may have not seen
Mhm.
the video. It was I saw it. It was very powerful, very powerful. The young man
18 years old.
who lost his brother to this shooting. Right, it was his brother. Very articulate, but not in and I don't mean in an intellectual way. Articulate from the heart. I mean authentic. And he hugged this young lady, and she held on to him. It was a beautiful moment, really. And yeah, I think it's gonna engender a debate, and it's good. It's good because that young man had no agenda. He was speaking from the heart
As a Christian.
as a Christian,
Pure
and he
Christian.
didn't. I don't think he even said anything like maybe I didn't. I don't think he said. I don't think he proclaimed himself as a Christian or
He
anything.
did.
Did he?
He did. He
did?
said, I love Christ.
Right, I heard that.
And then he asked the judge if he can go out there, break protocol, and hug the killer.
But the point I'm making, I could be wrong about this because I didn't. Sometimes I'm light on the detail. I don't think he said, "I am a Christian." Did he, or did
No,
he just say he's?
I think it was, I love Christ.
Exactly.
I follow Christ, so I love
Exactly.
Christ.
That's my point. My point was he was Christ-centered. He wasn't label-centered. He wasn't interested in proclaiming what he was. He was interested in that young lady more than anything else being drawn to Christ.
Well, that's like if you.
That's a
remember-
key point, I think.
As was the
Yeah.
judge.
Yeah.
If you go back,
Hi, Susan.
I not remember the exact number of years, but probably not more than 4 to 6, 8 years ago in South Carolina,
Yeah.
where you had the shooting,
Yeah.
where some of the family members on the witness stand did something very similar, not the hugging part, but they were saying, this young man, Mr. Root, who killed their relatives during a Bible study,
Right.
there were people on the witness stand during the sentencing phase saying that they forgave him. And that's also very powerful witnessing, that people who have taken your loved ones away and going up on the stand to say that you love the person and that you forgive them is also very Christ-centered.
Yeah, I remember too a few years ago that Amish shooting, their forgiveness.
Yes.
As I sat watching that young man, I don't know if any of you did this. I tried to put myself in his position, and I tried to think, if I lost my brother or sister or somebody, could I get there? I don't know. The honest answer any of us could give was, you don't know, because you don't really know until it happens to you. If it happens to you, where you're going to be. It's like death of loved ones or whatever. You may think you know where you are, but until you have the actual experience, it's really hard to know. But I thought about that, and I thought that that's how powerful that video was. That was probably a better evangelical tool than anything I've seen in a long time, because it was just an authentic witness, an authentic forgiveness.
Doesn't Christ teach us to love our enemies?
He does.
And it's very difficult to do so. And this man showed us how to do it.
Yeah, he did. He does. He teaches us much, and sometimes it stops just here, and that's the problem. That's the whole. That's what's one of the beauty of our church, that's remained, despite our failings as people within the church. The ethos of the church has remained uncompromised in its sacramental nature. And what I mean by that is that we can learn till we're blue in the face. It's not going to make any difference until it gets in here. And it doesn't get, the gateway, we absorb it here, but it doesn't connect. We have to connect it somehow. And it's through the repeated living the sacramental life in the church that softens the heart like fertile soil, so things begin to get, things in our head begin to reach our heart and kind of grow like plants, if I'm making any sense. And that's why, Nicole brought up endurance, earlier, and that's why so much of our faith life is endurance. And it is a test of that, and that's why Christ, to your point, you said something very simple. I mean, what I mean by that, not simple-minded, but just simple, and it's truth. The fact that God came as one of us, that he incarnated as one of us, automatically sanctifies our material life, the world. But I would say to you, and this is open for discussion, I would say to you that that sense in the broader Christendom, especially in the West, in the faded culture of the West, I'll call it, I don't know that that is really understood or accepted, right? You know, we have so much in the West, in Western thinking, although it didn't originate there, kind of, we can trace it back to Plato, probably even beyond that. There's this dichotomy between body and soul. And there's a lot of what's in our Western culture is this notion of the body as a prison to be liberated from. And there's this I would say, depending on the thought process, you might have the soul and spirit here, the body here, or some people like this, but it's almost never like this. Never seen as we, should understand it within Orthodox Christianity, as we use language because we have to for discussion, but they're not separate, right? So the fact that Christ came into the world is enough to tell us that everything about the world, flawed as it may be, is for us to engage in and to try to sanctify and try to make better, not of our own will, but as strictly as that young man, because we're drawn to Christ, and then that process of being drawn to Christ naturally begets in us something that as we grow just comes out more and more naturally. Because
and
we're
isn't
drawn
that
to Christ.
dichotomy well explained? Just hearing you say that, stream of consciousness,
That's
like
fine.
you're, taking one of those tests in schools with the school psychologist. It kind of reminds me of Dickens in A Tale of Two Cities. The best of times, the worst of times. It's a far, far better thing. The far, far better thing that I do than I've ever done. It's a far, far better place that I go to than I've ever been.
Charles
It's like-
Darnay, right?
Right.
Pravmir. Well, that's a great. I mean, I don't know how much we'll get into this today, but what's interesting about that, the Tale of Two Cities. So, depending what you read, surveys like the most popular books outside of scriptural books like the Bible, the Quran, whatever. Tale of Two Cities is usually one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Lord of the Rings is usually one or two. I know, John. But why is that? None. I don't remember. Lord of the Rings I practically know by heart. But Tale of Two Cities, I don't remember the exact language. But was anything Christian ever explicitly mentioned in the book? Was the word Christian used?
No, I don't think so.
And yet, that's embraced as a
Yes.
Christian story.
Yes.
Lord of the Rings, no organized religion. No, Tolkien, in his mind, he was writing a pre-Christian history, right? So there's no Christ, no organized religion. But yet those two books are embraced as deeply Christian books. But yet they didn't.
I may bring it to a more practical, more mundane perspective. One of the issues with our church, I'm afraid, in terms of being of the world, or in the world, but not of the world, is the participation in church. And you can see in some churches that talk more about your daily life and how Christianity impacts, as compared to talking about maybe more theoretical perspectives. Those churches are really having much more success today in terms of people
The ones
attending.
the ones that you're saying are what you're calling practical teaching, right?
That's correct. Yeah, much more. So it's a tough question. I happen to mention to Tina in church today that one's got to be careful to present orthodoxy in a way that people can really personally relate to it in their lives. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people coming into our church and not staying because they didn't feel that connection.
Right.
They felt in other religions.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I was even going down this road. And I'm not going to go too far today because it's not going to do justice to cover it. But one of the arguments I'll make in successive lessons, and what I'm seeing within Orthodoxy right now, is what do I call it? An understanding or an embracing of the understanding of the power of art to draw people practically to Christianity, to stir within them something that now allows them to connect their daily life to Orthodoxy, even to what's theoretical, but art produced by people that are the mustard seeds, that are so immersed in it that what naturally comes from them has embedded in it something that draws people to them, not with an agenda, not with I'm going to write a Christian book, or I'm going to make some Christian, not with anything like that. Just comes naturally out of them because they are committed, and that's what draws people. That's the argument. I don't know Dickens' background as much. I think he was Christian, or maybe I know Tolkien was deeply so, but he wasn't thinking when he created. He was just trying to write a story. But the Christianity from him flowed into it at such a deep level. It drew people. It continues to draw people to that, and then they realize what they're being drawn to. And I think, yeah, you're right. So as a church, now it doesn't have to. I'm talking art, and that's just one aspect. You can't. I'm not trying to bucket everything down into art by any means. But as a church, we have to do a better job of making the faith relatable to the everyday. I mean, Christ did that. Christ. I mean, he's God, so he knew this stuff. But if you really study his parables, and there's smarter people out there than me that can do justice to what I'm about to say. But if you want to reduce this to brain science, Christ knew how to blast past the gatekeeper in our mind, that frenemy we have called rational thought, which is given to us as a gift that should help us draw closer to Christ, but we use it in a reductionist way, right? And we elevate our own intellect higher than it should be, and then we try to reduce the faith down into it, and therefore we can't reconcile, therefore it's not true. He blasted right past that with his parables, and it struck people here. And he used everyday life to do so. That was the genius of his parables. And stories that are derivative of that genius are what impact people. That's the argument I'm making today, and I will continue to make.
Oh, I think that's totally true. And I find no better example than this wonderful was it 8-part series documentary, nothing to do with religion, but talking about art and how art conveys to everyday life and to selling it. Ken Burns just finished his country music.
So you're recording it, right?
Yeah.
I've watched it all
Yeah.
religiously because it's a lot about my hometown, and in it, you hear artists from other music genres saying that the appeal of country music. Take somebody like Ray Charles, who back in the '60s released a country album, which was unheard of at the time, to have an African American artist release a country album, and he said at the time it's because of the stories.
Yeah.
They hit people
Morning from
here.
Denver, Carol.
Relatable, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the whole, that you're saying the same thing about faith, that's kind of the intersection of art, and it's ironic on church, St. Romanus Church Musician Monday, that we learned this a long time ago from a fellow who was here, who was at the time, I think, director of religious education, that we can learn really the faith through a lot of our hymns, because it's all there.
Yeah, that's where if someone wants to really understand the theology of the church, they should study the hymnology, liturgics. It's all there. Although it's in language sometimes it's difficult to relate to. That's
To dissect and break down.
Yeah, I know it's hard. I mean, I'll confess that's not where I sought to learn the theology of the church. I went more to traditional books and talking to people, but it's there. If you really, for me it was kind of backwards. Once whatever understanding I had, then I began to recognize it in the hymnology. But I didn't get it from the hymnology at first because it was just it wasn't relatable to me as much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was an altar boy forever and knew the hymns by heart, but it didn't have the rational understanding of how A and B intersected and met.
Right.
Until you started getting more education to understand, okay, this is what this means. And that's really what it is to be, I guess, either, once you become of the age of reason, to accept or reject that rational mind, that free will that we have, to take this on or not. Are you going to have that relationship with Christ to be like Christ or not?
Yeah, I mean, the rational, like I said, the rational mind is a gift. It's just that we sometimes need to realign our gift. Art can help with that. but other experiences help as well. I mean, that's why, again,
Mustard seed.
we talked about it many, many times, and we'll talk about it many, many more times because it's so integral to our faith. But that's the place that pain and suffering often have. Keep us,
Grounded.
try to make us, what's the language everybody uses today? Make us woke? The woke in the right way. Right. From an Orthodox Christian perspective. So, we can all be woke. Yeah, I've taken it out of context. I just hear that. I'm not even sure of all the context. But I'm guessing they're not things that we would all consider to be woke necessarily. Although some of it, I think, is used for people to be more tolerant and loving toward each other. So that's not bad. But I think, being woke to what we're talking about today is difficult because we have so much within the church that are obstacles to us, right? The very incarnation, the dichotomy, the theoretical or the liturgical without the application, the discouragement of asking questions, right? Hard questions, tough questions, the discouragement of dealing with issues that are surrounding us, the inability to do so because we can't keep it simple. I mean, there's all kinds of things that get in our way in our trying to embrace and engage with the world. But again, mustard seed, we have to keep at it. We have to forgive each other when we lose our cool or we don't behave the way we should, and we just have to keep going. I mean, one of the scriptures, there's these worldly scriptures that I underline. I thought probably the one that was the most impactful to me I selected was John 17:15, where Christ was praying for his disciples. He said, "I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one." Right? We're not to remove ourselves from the world. We're the Lord. Properly translated and properly, well, maybe properly is too strong of the word. Maybe more accurately, the Lord's Prayer, right? Deliver us from the evil one. That's more in the Greek, I believe. It's more accurate. I just had to a church last Sunday. That's how they do the Lord's Prayer. They say the evil one. I know you always have. I mutter under my breath
grandmother
too.
and my mother taught me that, so you got to follow the.
I mutter under my breath for two reasons. One, because I think it's accurate, and then just to be ornery, to be different, than everybody else. But no, but that's the thing. We're not to. That's the big challenge: is not to succumb to the wrong things, and not to withdraw from the world either. Because Christ said, He said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Let your light shine before men, before people. Let your light shine." This quote read earlier: "Bring the the light of Christ's teaching," which is essentially bringing Christ Himself. C.S. Lewis, the writer and theologian, Anglican, but a lot of Orthodox, especially converts, embrace his teachings. He said, we're all to become little Christs. It takes time, effort, endurance, and then not being that balance of not being outside of the world, but also not being so conformed to the world that we end up preaching, teaching, living a very watered down message. Andy?
I was going to point out our new Archbishop really is headed in this direction.
Direction?
Yes,
I
I don't know
idea.
if you've noticed, he's been meeting with young people, and he says to the young people, I need to meet with you more because I need to learn more from you. He met with all the monks from all the monasteries in the country, and he's very much effectively taking Christianity into the world.
Good. I didn't know. I mean, part of it's just because there's only so much time in the day and I can't keep up with everything, but I'm glad that
He's woke.
he's woke. Can I say that and not get in trouble? Our Archbishop is woke? Go ahead, Dina.
I have a question, and this may be for another class, but if you want to influence the world, just first start with yourself and be a good person. When, other than with your family or your children or grandchildren, should you speak up and say something to others when you feel they're acting wrong?
Wow. As Christ said, who made me your judge?
That's right.
Well, I'm going to give you a very unsatisfying answer. It's going to get back to, first of all, let me answer this a little bit. I hope I don't circle too much. First of all, like you said, it's about ourselves. So the essence of everything is our own inner transformation. So we have to be working at that, taking the plank out of our own eye first. We have to be steadily doing that, day in and day out, prayerfully in the sacramental life of the church. Then what will happen, my experience has been, I say my experience, I'm talking about my personal experience, my experience in talking to others, and my experience learning from Holy Fathers, from saints, from anybody else, is that all gets down to a sense of discernment, where you just know it's the right time. I can't give you a prescriptive when it's time to speak, when it's not time to speak, because there's a lot of factors there. It's where you are. It's the person, where they are. Your sense of their receptivity to what you're going to say to them. So I don't know that I can box it in a formulaic way to say, in this case, I mean, there are certain things, like if you know someone got to murder someone,
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's certain things that are just,
Right.
beyond debate. But in terms of some of those areas that maybe someone's it's not readily apparent to them, their own behavior, or you see them going down a road, it's tough. I'm not going to claim to, be successful at it all the time. Some of it's our nature too. Even though I talk a lot on these things, I'm actually introverted by nature, so my first inclination is not to talk. So sometimes I'm the person that walked out of the room wishing I had said something, as opposed to many of our Greek brethren did walk out wishing they hadn't said something. Sorry, Dean, I don't have a good answer.
One of the advantages to living as long as I have is you get to see different patterns.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, Orthodox Christians, very much, is very distinct to me, are not automatic followers. They are very questioning of everything. Mm-hmm. It's just in their nature. But they are far more respectful of other people than are other faiths. And so as a consequence, I think the answer to that question is that in the Orthodox perspective, it's rarely done to tell a person you don't know what you're talking about.
Not in that sense, absolutely.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think.
Or change your conduct.
Or just. Well, I'll give you an example, and I felt guilty after I said it. A couple was giving me a ride home, and the driver was driving 30 miles an hour, and the fellow behind us kept honking at him. And I said, yeah, the guy shouldn't honk at you, because the man was getting upset, and I said, you're going the speed limit. And I said, then I quoted, I think it's H.L. Mencken, who said, I'm paraphrasing it, but have sympathy for everybody, because you don't know the private hell they're all going through. Mm-hmm. And the husband said something, well, maybe I should slow down. And then the wife said, oh, don't do that. And so then the guy pulled around us, and my friend looked over at the guy and said, oh, he's smoking, he's a redneck. And I said, Mary, and she's a very sweet person, so I was really surprised, but I said, Mary, remember, we're all creatures of God.
Even the redneck.
And I thought, should I have said that? I mean, that's not my place to really say that.
Make clear to the group there that you're watching you that phrase is not part of our church.
No.
This is this individual.
Yeah.
No, she's not Orthodox, but she's a very sweet person, and I was really surprised that she said that.
No,
Obviously a Southerner.
No, I don't think so at all.
Oh.
well,
Phrase.
I mean, I don't think you said anything terrible there. Just.
But is it my place to say that?
Well, I mean, I think Andy's right in the sense that most of the time, it's not. But I mean, what I try to default to when I can't help myself, I think I really need to say something. And again, I could be wrong. Is I always try to remember the way we look at things in Eastern Christianity is the metaphor of the hospital, not judgment. What's healthy for you or not healthy for you. And if I see something and I really feel compelled to speak, I'll try to frame it that way, not in a way that's like this. Because that's when people feel, and you may not use this gesture, but when they feel this from you, they're going to shut down, and rightly so. I mean, because a lot of times when we're like this, if we really think about it, we're hypocrites, because there's something we've done that we're about to espouse to them that we, So, but yeah, I think in general, what's the old saying? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah. So don't say anything.
Yeah, generally, but sometimes you have to. There's certain situations. If you see someone going down a path that's going to cause them harm, I mean, especially young people, and you're older and wiser, and you know where they could be headed. again, I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of, I don't know, these likes can be delayed, so I don't know if it's what you said, Andy said, I said, I have no idea. But anyway, if somebody said something everybody likes, so I'm seeing a ton of them there.
Well,
Go ahead,
so
Andrea.
sometimes it can be just very challenging building what you're going through. Recently, we attended a wedding. Someone who grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, served as an altar boy, and the wedding was not in the church, and the wedding was officiated by a man named Bob, who got his license online 2 weeks prior to the wedding.
One of those.
I've been to those weddings.
Yeah.
It's very challenging when you grow up with a person and you see this road, and not that they're not delightful people, but also explaining to your children in a way
Thanks, Nicole.
where they accept what they grow up with. This is very different than what we know to be true, but then to accept and love. I went through my own challenge to just go, what do I, you know? And I said, I finally, with the self-reflection for me was, you know, I am going to give them that icon for their wedding, because at least I know that there is an Orthodox icon in their house. And maybe one day they'll look at that Orthodox icon and say, you know, maybe it's something I should go back and explore. But I know it was challenging for me as a family member. And just explaining that to help your kids embrace with love, but know that when they get married someday, it should be in the church.
Yeah, that's, you know, with kids it's difficult. With young people, you know, this whole dynamic with the world, being in the world but not of the world. Because, you know, kids, especially teens, they're immersed in the world. You know, and that's just what, you know,
That's right.
they tell us that they're okay with going to church, but they're lying. They don't want to be here. You know, they say what we want to hear, but they're lying. And I think with them, but they're judgmental a lot by nature. Remember how judgmental, I mean, I can speak for myself. I remember I was, you know, typical teen. I would judge first, ask questions later. I mean, most of us.
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, it's just nature. And then now with the social media where everybody, they're just espousing judgment right and left. So it's good to temper that, you know, and you know, I don't know. I mean, I like, for me at least, I try to just put out what my expectations are and go from there. But I think for young people, at least what I've always told my daughter is, any situation I expect one thing, no matter what, and that's for you to be kind. If I hear you're not kind, I can't defend you in any situation. That's simple. Start there.
You were very respectful.
Yeah, you were.
the way
I
you
mean,
did
it
it.
sounded the way you handled that wonderfully. You know.
Yeah.
Not that I'm your judge, but it sounds good to me.
And it was hard.
Yeah,
It was very hard.
I'm sure it was.
Maybe for certain young people, it's actually not only for young people, but
Oh, no, it's not.
culturally specific. Sorry, maybe it's a bit shifting off the topic, but
No, we're not.
Orthodox Church could be attractive from the point of aesthetic, from the art point of view, especially those as beautiful as Russian Orthodox Church.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
They may be going to visit, like to museum, sort of that.
well, that's
Looking
why.
at icons are really pieces, masterpieces, Russian icons especially.
No, I know, and
Famous.
I'm glad you brought that up, Boris, because I thought about it in liturgy, and I didn't want to take out
It doesn't
a pen and write.
contradict as long as you have proper attitude, but of course certain people, not only young actually, some people going for church like on the concert, listening the excellent chorus voices and music. And
Well, you know, our way of worship is very artistic, and I was thinking about it. I was sitting in liturgy, and I couldn't use my phone or take out a piece of paper to
For
write
certain
this
people,
point
it
down,
could
because that would have been
distract.
rude. But I think that's another reason I wanted to, and I'll get into it next week. I wanted to talk a little bit about the artistic side of things, because that's how. Look at the fabric of our worship. We have the sermon, right? And a well done sermon appeals to us rationally. Hopefully, it stirs something within. But the large part of our experience, our worship experience, is through a very, you know, musical, visual arts.
it is masterpiece, right?
Yeah. And so it's done in a way to stir the faculty of imagination within us, and that's what. And I'll close on that. When that's dormant, when the faculty of imagination is dormant in our head, that's when we have trouble fully embracing the faith, especially the Orthodox Christian faith and its sacramental nature. That's why it's important and again, and I felt this was all in keeping with the broader theme today, which I stuck on, which was the engagement of the world or lack thereof, because these are all real life things that we're talking about, that where we struggle to engage or how to engage in what we do, but as Orthodox Christians, whatever art forms appeal to us, it's very important to embrace them and to be living the sacramental life, to discern what's good and what's not so good outside. And
That's also reason that's also reason why many Protestants blame Orthodox as well as actually Catholics for breaking what is this fourth command, no image, or whatever.
Right, and they just and they don't understand it, and perhaps we've done a poor job of explaining it. And I'm going to quote the Holy Father next week, because this is a very this is an argument that can be misunderstood. So
of course
I'm going back to the bosses, to show my point. But I'm saying, we have to stir that faculty in our brain of imagination, stir it to really embrace the faith. So I'm going to end there. Just like I said, this was kind of an abbreviated class because of our hierarchical liturgy. We'll resume next week. I think we'll be on time. We'll see. Yeah.
Was this another bishop coming?
Yeah. But you know what? We'll start when we start. So God bless everyone. Thank you for joining this week. Have a blessed week. And we're going to close in the Lord's Prayer. And God willing, we'll be back next week and you can join us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one.
For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. I cross with my right hand. God bless everybody.